Welcome to the STEM Pathways with Rohan Sharma podcast, where we dive into the exciting world of science, technology, engineering, and math. In each episode, we share exciting stories, groundbreaking research, and inspiring interviews with experts and enthusiasts who are pushing the boundaries of innovation. Whether you're a student, a professional, or just curious about how the world works, join us as we explore the endless possibilities of STEM. Let's get started. Today I'll be interviewing Nima Banai, who holds a master's from Stanford in management science and a master's from USC in mechanical and aerospace engineering. How are you doing?
Good, good. Thanks for having me on, Ron.
Yeah, so to get started, I wanted to ask what made you choose your degree for your undergrad, which you did at UC San Diego.
Sure. Yeah, so I early on kind of knew I wanted to get into hardware development, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. I sort of grew up playing with Legos, a lot of, building different kinds of kits, different models. So I always liked working with my hands, taking apart my game consoles at the time. And so, yeah, I always had that interest to get into sort of hardware. I love robots and manufacturing, and so it was sort of an easy choice for me. The reason for mechanical engineering and aerospace was really, they're both pretty broad. So you could work on, manufacturing electronics. You could work on planes, cars, medical devices. So you have a lot of different options with mechanical engineering, and so that's kind of what attracted me to that major.
Yeah. So what was your experience like at San Diego?
It was great. I mean, it was fantastic. So UCSD, one of the most beautiful campuses, just right on the beach. When I first visited when I had already accepted, so I never did the sort of university tours that most people do. So I just went with what I could find online, and it looked great. Um, I had I had an interesting path to UCSD. So I moved to the U.S. when I was 17. So I'm Persian. I moved from Iran. So when I first moved, a lot of the schools were, I didn't have any high school record here in the US. And so a lot of the schools were saying, like, oh, you need to, take the high school proficiency exam or you need to take this exam. And so I started going to Santa Rosa Junior College here in the Bay Area first to establish some school record. And then I transferred into UCSD. And so that I went through sort of that, the transfer process. Um, but yeah, and then there was Dr. Bewley's lab, which is in design and design thinking and robotics at UCSD. Also, I had a chance to do research there, and so that was another thing that really attracted me to that school.
Yeah. So when did you decide that you wanted to go to USC?
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to get into grad school after finishing my undergrad studies. I did really enjoy doing research in undergrad, and that's something that I recommend to folks, your age and if you're in college, is even if you're an undergrad, do research. You learn a ton by doing that. And so, there is another lab at USC, Dr. Yan Jin's lab, which I also was sort of following even before deciding to go to school there. And so, yeah, decided to apply to a few schools, got into USC and accepted. But yeah, I always knew I wanted to pursue and do a little bit deeper research. Um, and yeah, I also applied to a few PhD programs after finishing undergrad, but once you do a lot of tours before you accept a PhD program, and I think I toured UC Irvine's program, met the lab, and really decided that I wasn't going to go down the path of academics, and so PhD didn't make sense. So I accepted the master's program at USC and went there.
Yeah, so what was your experience like when you were at USC?
Very good. Also very positive. Definitely more, deeper research when you're a grad school. You really can do, get into a lab and really do deep research. So that was a great thing. A lot of different clubs at USC. So there was I think, Formula Club for racing. There was the Rocket Club at USC, which is very good aerospace club. So a lot of in grad school, I really wanted to maximize sort of my network, doing research, and joining a lot of clubs and activities. Um, besides just the core coursework. So met a lot of my close friends there. Had a great time doing research and going to a lot of clubs. So yeah, had a good time, good experience.
So what was your first job out of your master's?
Yeah, so that's another sort of interesting path. So I finished my first master's at USC in 2014. I went to as I was describing a lot of these events and clubs and sort of meetups, and one of them had the founder of this startup called Misfit Wearables. This guy named Sunny Vu, who really became my first mentor after school, and we're still in contact. And he was at this conference giving a talk, and I sort of met him there. A few months later, when I finished my program, I reached out to him and he was like, "Hey, if you don't know really what you want to do, because I really didn't know what I wanted to do after masters." He was like, "Hey, why don't you come work for me? You learn a lot. I have the startup; it's growing." And so that was sort of my first role out of graduate school was at this startup called Misfit Wearables. I joined relatively early, so I think it was post Series A, which is a funding round. So this is sort of when a company is more stable. It's not sort of just two people in a garage. So it's growing, and that's kind of what I recommend to young people, like especially your first job out of school. I think the most amount of learnings you can have is joining an early stage startup that is a little bit de-risked. So post Series A, and you just grow with it. You just grow with the company and just see what happens. Either you have an exit, which is great, or it goes out of business. Either way, you really just learn a ton. And so that was my first job out of school.
Yeah. And how long did you spend there?
Yeah, so I was there almost 2 years. That company, I joined at Series A, I think for a couple of years, and that company fortunately got acquired. So it was bought by the Fossil Group, the fashion company. So the number one thing I learned at that company was that doing a startup is really hard, but it's possible. So you see a lot of ups and downs, and a lot more downs than ups, to be honest. But at the end of the day, if you just persevere through it, it's possible to have a success. And so that was the number one thing I learned. Right after that, I joined a very early stage startup. So I was the founding engineer of this other startup called Oro Home, here also in the Bay Area. And it was really so my first job out of school, being at Misfit, seeing sort of a startup grow and get acquired, really set the trajectory for my career. Of I really want to be in startups, building things from the ground up, prototyping things, and that stage of product development is really interesting to me. Um, and so, yeah, I joined this company called Oro Home, was there 3.5 years, as sort of, from founding engineer to we were 20, 25 people by the end of it. And, decided to go into some of the larger tech companies, which we can get to. But yeah, long
Mhm.
story short, yeah.
But yeah, so what'd you do? I see you worked at Amazon after that. What made you want to kind of switch to industry, more
Yeah,
typical?
so definitely. Yeah, so I really spent the first 6 to 7 years of my career at two startups that I mentioned, and so really at that point I was looking to see, how are things done at a larger company and at scale, especially for my field, which is hardware and manufacturing. I really wanted to see, okay, how are things done at a large scale of let's say an Amazon or an Apple. And so after that startup called Oro, I went to Amazon's Lab 126, which is their hardware and research lab here in the Bay Area. And I was working on the Kindle products, the Echo Speaker line of products, and really, went from a tiny team and, me being like every engineer is a very key part of the team to being part of a really large team, and doing things at scale and doing factory visits in Asia and seeing millions of units come off the line. So That was sort of the motivation to switch to the larger companies. I was at Amazon for just over a year, and then switched to Facebook's Reality Labs, which now is called Meta Reality Labs, working on AR glasses. And so I think Project Orion, which was recently announced. Very cool project, great team working on sort of AR VR space. And then lastly, I joined Google working on the Pixel team. Also, another sort of large company experience, learning how to do things at scale. Um, and so, yeah, that was sort of the path to those three companies.
Yeah. And did you enjoy being at these big companies compared to startups?
Yeah, so what I'm doing now, which is now I'm a co-founder with my friend of a startup of our own, kind of answers that question of I had a great time at the larger companies. There was a couple of reasons why I always wanted to go back into the startup world. One is just the amount of impact that you have on the product and the outcome of the company. So if you're part of a startup, or obviously if you're a co-founder, every single thing that happens because of you. And so if you're not there and you're not doing the work, that work doesn't get done. At a larger company, it's much harder to see your impact. You go on vacation and like you come back and nothing's really changed. Everything has been, moving along, which is great because then you can take a break. But I really like to see the direct impact of my work to the outcome that it has on the company or the business. And so, I always knew I wanted to go back into the startup world. I spent, 5 years at the larger companies that we talked about. Um, but yeah, always wanted to go back, and now I'm doing a startup of my own.
Yeah. So what are you guys making?
Yeah, so I started this company called Assemble Labs with my co-founder Craig. We are basically building a lot of tools, software tools for hardware development to make hardware easier. So when we were at the larger companies, he was at Apple, I was at the companies we mentioned. We saw a lot of software development tools come out and make the job of software engineers easier. A lot of productivity tools, and nowadays a lot of AI assisted tools, but none of that was being carried over to the world of hardware and making things and manufacturing, and things in the physical world. And so our goal, and this is what we're building a set of tools to make the job of hardware engineers easier.
So you started this how long ago again?
Yeah, we started in May of 2024, so it's about 9 months now, 8 to 9 months.
And then I guess obviously, like you were saying earlier, like it is not easy to make a startup. Right now, I guess, and I'm guessing at the start as well, it's especially not easy. Uh,
Yeah.
how do you see it going from here?
Yeah, so I would say for me, and it sort of depends on individual basis, but for me, once I have a goal and a path to go down on, the execution part is more enjoyable and easy. The early stages of a startup, it's much more difficult because of the instability and not a clear direction of what you need to do. So, the past 9 months, I would say we've pivoted our idea maybe three or four times from, we have an idea, we think this is valuable, build a prototype, go out and put it in front of people, and then you realize, okay, nobody's actually using this. I got to go back to the drawing board and build something else. And so that process, the faster you can do that, the better, because in the early stages, you're just trying to find a direction to go down. So we made that feedback loop very quick. So, spend a week, build a prototype, put it in front of people, get feedback, and then change course. And that part, I had to learn because even earlier when I was at these startups, we already had a direction and I had to go in and execute. And obviously at the larger companies, you're just, executing on what is the goal of the organization. But starting something from scratch was especially hard because of, okay, it's just me and my co-founder. We need to figure out what to build, who's going to use it, what do they need? All of these things that you take for granted at a job have to be figured out by you as a founder. And so that was the really hard part. So now 9 months in, we have a more clear direction, and now it's about execution, which comes easier to me, and I think comes easier to a lot of engineers. Um, so yeah,
Yeah. So for my last question, I wanted to ask if you had one piece of advice for someone who's still in high school or early in college wanting to follow a similar career path as you.
for sure. Yeah, so I would say, especially if you're sort of a junior in college and you're thinking about, okay, what do I want to do after I graduate? Or if you're in high school trying to decide what major, there's a lot of, you know, quote unquote, like shiny paths of like, oh, I want to join a big company. I want to join, the FANG companies, or I want to join, maximize my starting salary, or join like a, cool company that has a known name. What I would suggest, the number one thing is to join a growing startup that is not well known, and either join as an intern. So if you're, late in high school or early in your college career, just join as an intern, and you could join as a generalist intern. So don't worry about the title. Just join a company that will have you as a summer intern, or if you've already graduated college and you're trying to find a job, like I would just try to find a role at a fast growing but lesser known company. So, if you talk about startups, it's sort of a series A level startups, because you just learn a ton, and you learn about all aspects of building a product, not just your title and your role. At a larger company, if you're a mechanical engineer on a given product, you don't really see anything else going on in the business side, on the marketing side, on the sales side, on other parts of the engineering organization. You have very little visibility. And so, the first, I would say, 5 years of your career, just spend it at a small company and absorb as much as possible. Don't worry about the title. So the title doesn't matter. Just get in there and do stuff. Things will happen. And just do that, I would say, for your first one or two roles out of school.
All right then. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
You got it. Thanks for having me.